Here we go. Okay, so look, I'm going to be very quick here to just take 5 minutes. I'm going to talk about 10 quick tips on how to raise a seed round. LegalVision is a startup itself. We've raised 3 rounds of capital ourselves, so we know a bit about how hard it is to raise a round. We also help a lot of startups that are raising their seed round. So bear in mind, raising a seed round is different to raising a Series A, to raising a Series B. Often you're raising off a group of angel investors. Sometimes there'll be a venture fund in there, but it's important to kind of note that these tips, I guess, only relate to certain types of startups and at a certain stage in their development. So, look, the first one, and we see this a lot, I mean, we probably see 50 or so startups a month, and really the key is not to kid yourself. In terms of the sort of business that you've got, is it a business that an investor is going to want to invest in? And unfortunately, there's a lot of businesses out there that can be great businesses, but they're not going to actually be businesses that it makes sense to invest in because they're not really going to generate a long-term capital return for shareholders. They're lifestyle businesses or they're small businesses, and they can be great businesses, but don't imagine that your business is one that can necessarily raise capital. You need to really think about it, make sure that it makes sense to raise. The second one is to be ambitious. If you are going to raise, you need to be basically building a business that's going to be a large business. Ambition is really important here. It's no use sort of saying, look, I'm going to build this business. We're going to end up doing 10 million revenue a year. That is not the sort of business that a venture investor is generally going to want to invest in. And the reason for that is they're not, again, going to get a good return on a risk-adjusted basis. So if you do want to raise money, you need to be ambitious. The third, now I've got generate revenue. It's not strictly true. If you're building a business that's a revenue generation business, then you need to generate revenue. If you're building a business that's all about traffic, then you need to be obviously bringing in traffic to the website. If you're building a long-term sort of hardware play and you're not going to generate revenue straight away, ignore this. This is a tip for businesses that really are planning on generating revenue from the get-go. It's very hard to raise. If that's your business model, it's very hard to raise without having a bit of revenue showing that you've got some sort of traction. The fourth one is spend a little bit of money on a deck. This is something that we see a lot. A lot of decks are incredibly ugly, are a real mess, and really don't convey the message that you're trying to convey. It's really cheap to get something that looks a little bit decent. It doesn't need to be fancy, just a little bit decent. And that'll mean that someone can actually read through it without really straining to understand what is going on. The fifth one is know your numbers. So, this is a really big one, and we see this a lot. Startups come in, you start talking about the business, the model, so on and so forth, and the founders don't really actually understand the basics, like their customer acquisition cost, like their lifetime value, their contribution margin, all that sort of stuff. You need to actually understand what those numbers are, and you need to know what those numbers are, because if you don't know them yourself, you can't explain it to investors, and whether it's a seed round, a Series A, or later, you need to know that. You need to know it really well. The sixth is spread the net. So do not assume that the first few people you speak to when you're raising money are going to invest. They're probably not. You generally, unless you've got a fantastic sort of startup and an investor who's going to go in straight away, you generally need to speak to quite a few investors. And even do this whilst you're leading up to raising a round. So one thing that you kind of see quite a lot, you're raising an angel round, you might have 10, 12 angels in on that. People do drop out. It does happen. So always plan on raising a little bit more than you'd initially planned on, and that will mean that you don't end up with a round that's not filled out. The seventh, look, raising is a job. It's not something you kind of do when you feel like it. It's very hard. You need to plan it out, you need to work at it, you need to do it continuously and consistently if you are going to raise. Now, again, if you've got a startup that is just fantastic and that has heaps of VCs who want to invest straight away, so on and so forth, then this might not be as relevant, but a lot of startups we work with take months and months to raise a round, and you really need to focus on it and put the effort in. The eighth is don't undervalue your startups. So this is one that we see a lot on seed rounds, and I think it's maybe something that happens a bit more in Australia, is people raising on ridiculously low valuations, investors, seed stage investors ending up with 30% of the company having put in 150K. That really screws up your business from the get-go because you've given away too big a chunk of the business. You're going to find it very hard to raise your kind of Series A round because future investors look at that and go, there's too much of this business owned by people who have not really put in that much money. The founders don't have a large enough chunk of the company to ensure that they want to stay with it over a number of rounds of dilution. So the most expensive capital you ever raise, of course, is your first round. Make sure that you don't undervalue your startup at that time. Of course, the counterpoint to that is don't be greedy. We also see people who turn up saying they're going to raise on a $15, $20 million pre-money valuation when they have no business, they have no revenue, they have no users, they have no customers. Now, if you're a fantastic sort of entrepreneur who has sold a couple of businesses for huge amounts of money, then maybe you'll be able to raise a really high valuation without a business in place, but it's unlikely to happen if you're a sort of first-time starter. So don't get greedy. And then the last point is do not mess up the legals. Now, we are a law firm. That's what we do. We help people. We don't mess up the legals. We help people not mess up the legals. But, you know, this is something we see time and time again. Shareholders agreements, IP assignment agreements, employment agreements, all that sort of stuff. It needs to be done. It's not terribly exciting. But getting it done avoids a lot of trouble down the track. So if you have any questions, please get in touch, legalvision.com.au, and thank you very much.